Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing, 1, 2, 3. Welcome everyone. I want to, in this video, it's going to be a short video. We're going to actually break it into 3 parts, which will be part 1, part 2, and part 3. And we'll dig a little bit deeper in classes in each one. So the first one, I will just introduce you to a simple class, define what a class is, and we'll create a few little items in it, which will be the members and a few of the functions. So basically a class is really, it's a blueprint that allows you to create other objects, and it allows you to hide, and allows you to do what's called encapsulation and a bunch of other things that we'll get a little bit deeper into later on. So right now I've started a file, and I have IOStream, I have IOmanip, and I have CMath in here. So what I want to do here is start off with pi, because we're going to need it to calculate the circumference. So what I want to do here is create a simple class. And to do that, you just type the word class. Now notice that's in lowercase in here. Then I'm going to name my class. We're going to do a circle class. And it's good programming habits to name any object that you create, a user type, with a capital letter. That helps you distinguish that it's not built into C++. And all we do is class circle. We do our opening and closing brackets, and I like to put in comments as to what a closing bracket is. So now what we need to do is define some data objects. So for a circle, we're going to need a radius. And I'm going to capitalize radius, and I will explain why in a little bit. And we'll need a diameter. I'm using integers for this. Then we will need a circumference and an area. And last is area. So to create an instance of circle, all you have to do in main is type in the word circle and whatever you want to name it. I like to name my structures to begin with an S, my vectors to begin with a V. If I use an array, I like to begin with an A, and with a class, I like to begin with a C. That's my personal way of naming them. That way I can use the same name if I want, but I usually, for some reason, have developed the habit of putting it in my. So I'm going to put in my circle. That's all you need to do. So how do you access it? If you're familiar with structures, you know that you type in the name of the structure variable, a period, and it lists all the members in here. A structure is very similar to a class with one major exception, and you'll see what there is, one major difference. So let's just type in C, my circle, and I put in period, and notice nothing shows up. Well, that's a dilemma, because what good is having a class you can't access it? So why are they not showing up? Very simple. With a structure, all these things inside the structure by default are public. With a class, by default, they're private, which means unless you declare them as public, you're not going to be able to see them. So I'm going to declare them as public, and then we're going to change it to private. So let's just type in public here, and a colon. And now when I type in a period, notice that all these things are available. That's a problem, because we don't want to have access to the actual variables themselves. We want to use functions that allow us access in there. So let's just go back and we'll take this out here. And we'll put in public here. And I will type in private here. By default, anything that's not said with public is going to be private. I like to list all my variables that are private and functions that are private up top first, and do the public ones later. That's my personal preference. I think that it's very important, though, that you always label it as private or public so you don't accidentally put in public and then put a private in later on. So now what I want to do here is write a simple function that's going to allow me to set the radius in here. So I will create a function called setRadius. Now this is going to be a void because we're not returning anything. We're just actually setting the radius. And this is just like a function prototype in a main program. So what I want to do is create the actual function definition. And you could do it inside the class, but it's really better off, especially if you have a large class, to make sure it's outside the class. And an even better way of doing it is to have in separate file altogether. That will be in the later video. So let's go and create the definition here. And what I'll do is move this up to where it needs to be. And then we'll get rid of this here so we can work with it. So now setting the radius is very simple. So any function that's inside the class. So notice that the class ends here. Any function that's inside the class, I could, like this here, setRadius, I could have just done setRadius and defined it here. But because it's outside the class, I need to put in circle, which is the class itself, and the 2 dots. Just like some of you may use std : for certain variables in here, so you don't have to type in using namespace standard. But right now, we want to make sure that we have circle in here. And let's go and do a very simple thing. We're going to do radius. And we actually have to pass an integer. And I'm going to put in radius here. And I'm going to do radius. So let's, instead of using little radius, suppose I did this. Well, how would it know which radius you want? So I've always developed the habit of anytime I want to use a member variable, I always put this here. And I don't need, if I hit this again, it's going to double it up. So I'll leave it like here. And it did not work. So it didn't make the arrow, probably because something's there. Let's go and do this and click on radius. And notice that it changed it to an arrow. This object means I want to refer to the circle class. That's what the this stands for in here. And then I can call this little r, or I can leave it here. So now it knows that this radius here is different than the object that we defined in the class. So I like to use little r's in here. And I like to do camel case. So that works out well in here. And then we need a semicolon. So we're going to set the radius here. And let's just do setRadius. And we'll set it to 10. Well, right now that's great, except now we have no way of knowing what the radius is. So let's write a getter. And that needs to be public as well. This time we're going to return an integer. We'll call it getRadius. We don't need to pass anything, but notice I'm going to type in the word const afterwards. And the reason why I'm typing const is that guarantees that nothing can get changed inside the function. It's always a good habit to do that so you don't accidentally change something without realizing it. So we're going to go, we're going to create it. And this time it put it inside the class or up top above main, which is what we want. So really just getting the radius is very simple. It's returning this dot radius. So let's go and set radius. And I always like to use variables. I'm not a big fan of printing functions using cout. Sometimes you can actually get some kind of strange results, even though they actually are correct. So I'm going to create a radius variable here. I always like to initialize it to 0. And a good rule of thumb is to make sure that you would circle. Now, again, this is not required in C++ programming. Depending upon your instructor, I being one of them, require all variables to initialize and to be the purpose of it. However, that's up to your instructor as to what the rules are in here. I just feel it's good programming. It's always good to do something you don't need than to not do something then wind up that you do need it. So now let's just go and do radius equals, and again, see my circle dot get radius. And we'll see out the radius. That's if I can spell. Again, if I can spell. So let's go and set the radius to 10, and it should print 10 if we did it right. And we have the radius is 10. Well, that's good. So now we have a little dilemma. We're setting the radius, but what about the diameter? Are we going to have a separate set diameter? Well, that's going to be a problem, because if you set the diameter to say 12 when your radius is 5, you have a dilemma. So what I'm going to do inside of set radius, after I do the radius, I'm going to do this dot diameter equals 2 times this dot radius, or you could do radius itself. It's basically the same thing in here. And now if I had typed in the word const here, we'd run into a problem because we're changing things in here. So let's go and run the program. This time I'm going to create another variable called diameter. And I will leave the commenting out. So for time purposes, it's always a good idea to make sure that you're commenting. So we'll do cout diameter is, and if we did it right, it's going to get set automatically. So let's just do diameter. And let's run it. And if we did it right, the diameter should be 20. I always recommend make one change, test it. So it's got the radius is 10. Well, the diameter is 0. So now we have a dilemma. So notice how easy it is to pick up a mistake when you do one thing. So let's go back up to our set radius and diameter. Well, why is that? Well, it's very simple. Because did we get the diameter? No. So now let's go back and get it. So the diameter is equals get and we have we actually haven't written it, so that explains it. Let's go back and I knew there was something I needed to do. So let's go back and do get radius, and this time we're going to do get diameter. And we'll do constant there. And let's go and do the function. And it's nothing more than return this dot diameter. And now we will do cout diameter is get diameter. Now, if we did it right, it will work. So let's go and test this. And the radius is 10, the diameter is 20. So let's test it again one more time. Let's go and do set the radius. And we're going to run into a problem. And I will explain it to you in a second. So let's just do it 15. And I'm bringing this up so that you remember to do this. Anytime you set the radius, you're going to set the diameter. So if I do this again, we're not going to get the right results. So notice that the radius is 10, diameter is 20, but the diameter is still 20. The reason for that is we did not get the diameter. So we need to do this again here. And let's try it one more time. So this time it should be 30. And that's what it is. So let's just do one more thing. Let's do the circumference. So the circumference is going to be something that is going to be accessed when we set the radius. And I'll explain that as well. So let's go and we're going to do a void. And you can call it calc if you want. We're not really setting it. In my opinion, we're actually calculating it in here. So, again, it's really a matter of what you feel comfortable with. So I'm going to call it, let me see what, I have it in the function that I have in here, get diameter and get circumference, get area. And then what we need is something that's going to actually calculate it. So I don't have to spell it wrong. I'm going to copy it from here. And notice it's in my private in here. So now we have calc circumference. We need to create it. And I've already created it. And I'm just going to copy it over. And then we're going to do one more thing that we need to fix. So notice that whenever I calc the circumference, to be on the safe side, I'm making sure that diameter is accurate. You don't really have to do it, but I'm making sure to do it. So now let's go and calculate the circumference in here. So whenever I set the radius now, we're going to set the circumference itself. So we're going to set the radius here. And the first thing that I'm going to do is set the diameter. Then I'm going to use calc circumference. I don't need to pass anything because it's all part of the function and we have access to all of the private variables. So now let's go and create a variable called circumference. And this time, since it's a double, I'll initialize it to 0, 0. And we don't really have to calculate the circumference in here. We don't have to do get circumference unless we want to print it. So let's go and get a certain get circumference. Very simple. So we have our set radius, get diameter. Let's just do an double. And we'll call it get circumference. Constant. So once we're getting the circumference, all we need to do is return it. So let's go and do return this dot circumference. Now in main we have circumference equals this. Let's do C my circle dot get circumference, and then we'll do C out the circumference is circumference. And then if you want to, you can always format it however you want to do it. So I want to, let's just make it 2 decimal places. So since we have IOManip in here, that allows us to set it to whatever decimal places is. So I'm going to do this, my C out right in the very beginning here. And you always want to make sure that you type in fixed, and then the amount of decimal places you want with set precision. And we'll do 2. Now remember that the fixed and the set precision stay the same until you change them. So if you want something to be 3, you would have to do another set precision. That does not apply to set width though. So make sure that you're aware of this. So let's go now and run it again. And we have 10, 10, 10. The circumference is 94.2. I'm assuming that's correct. So I'm going to make the radius this time 5. That way I know that it should be 10 times 3.14, and it'll be very easy to check. And it happens to be 3142. So if I wanted it to be more decimal places, I can do set precision. But if you take a look at this, 3.14 would be 31.415 because 5 is higher. It's going to go to the rounded up to the next one in here. So that is it for this video. And we can talk more about rounding later on, but 5 and above is going to get raised higher. So let's go and end this video here. The next one we'll do the area. And then in the third video, we'll break it down into 3 separate files: a main file, a header file, and a class file. So that's it for this. Hope this is good for you. Please, if you like my videos, please like them. Please leave comments. When you leave comments in there, it really helps me to make videos. Let me know what you like. If there's something you don't like, let me know what you didn't like in here. And hopefully we can improve and I can do more and more of these for you. So have a wonderful day and see you the next time around.